We built it with our bare hands.
43 years of sweat and sacrifice.
And our own son tried to steal it from us.
He told us we were too old to understand business anymore.
Too old? I was closing deals when he was still in diapers.
But the worst part? He wanted to put us in a nursing home.
So we taught him a lesson he'll never forget.
And saved everything we ever worked for.
Let me take you back to 1982. Eleanor and I were 32 years old, newly married, and completely broke. I mean broke. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, and the smell of detergent mixed with our dinner every single night. But we had something more valuable than money. We had a dream, and we had each other. I'd been working as an accountant for a manufacturing company, watching the owner make every mistake in the book. Eleanor was a secretary at a law firm, learning the ins and outs of contracts and negotiations without even realizing she was getting an education worth millions. One night, I came home and found Eleanor at our tiny kitchen table, surrounded by papers she'd borrowed from work. She looked up at me with those beautiful eyes and said something that changed our entire lives. "Arthur, I've been studying these supplier contracts. I think I know how to do this better. I think we could start our own distribution company." Now, most men might have laughed it off or told their wife to stick to typing. Not me. I knew Eleanor had a mind sharper than any Harvard MBA I'd ever met. We scraped together $15,000. Half came from selling Eleanor's grandmother's jewelry, and that hurt her soul. I could see it. The other half came from a loan from my brother, who thought we were absolutely insane. Maybe we were. But that insanity built Thompson Distribution Systems from nothing into a $30 million enterprise.
Arthur forgets to mention the nights I found him sleeping at his desk, or the times we chose between paying our mortgage and making payroll. We always chose payroll. Our employees had families too. That's something our son never understood. Business isn't just about profit margins and stock options. It's about people. It's about building something that matters, something that creates value for everyone involved, not just the person at the top. Those early years were brutal, I won't lie. I remember one Christmas our son Marcus was maybe 7 years old and we couldn't afford presents. Arthur and I wrapped up a deck of cards in a notebook, trying to make it seem exciting. Marcus cried. He wanted what his classmates had: video games and expensive toys. I held him and promised that one day things would be different. And they were. By the time Marcus was in high school, we could afford anything he wanted. Private school, tennis lessons, summer trips to Europe. Maybe that was our first mistake.
Success changes people, but it changes children in ways you can't always predict. Marcus grew up watching us go from struggling to comfortable to wealthy. But he didn't see the struggle the same way we lived it. To him, it was just ancient history, stories we told at dinner. The wealth became his normal. The mansion, the luxury cars, the country club membership, he thought that's just how life was supposed to be. We sent him to Princeton. Full tuition, no loans, no part-time jobs. He studied business administration, and I remember feeling so proud at his graduation. Here was my son, holding a degree from one of the finest universities in America, ready to join the family business. Eleanor and I had already planned his transition. We'd start him in logistics, let him learn the operation from the ground up like we did. Then sales, then management, and eventually, when we were ready to slow down, he'd take over as CEO. But Marcus had different ideas. 2 weeks after graduation, he came to our home office with a PowerPoint presentation. A PowerPoint presentation for his own parents. He wanted to start at VP level, skip all the grunt work, as he called it, and implement immediate restructuring. He used words like disruption and optimization and eliminating redundancies. What he meant was firing half our staff and outsourcing to cheaper labor overseas.
I watched Arthur's face during that presentation, and I saw something break inside him. Not anger, not yet. It was disappointment so deep it was almost physical. Our son was talking about the people we'd worked alongside for 20 years like they were line items on a spreadsheet. Martha in accounting, who'd been with us since year 2. Redundant. Jorge in the warehouse, who'd saved us from a catastrophic shipping error. Inefficient. These weren't just employees. They were family. They'd celebrated with us, cried with us, built this company with us. But we loved our son. We wanted to believe he just needed time, needed to understand the heart of what we'd built. So Arthur agreed to bring him on as a regional manager, a position with real responsibility but enough oversight that he couldn't damage everything we'd created. Marcus wasn't happy, but he accepted it. For a while, things seemed okay. Not great, but okay.
The problem started small. Marcus would skip Monday morning meetings, claiming he was networking with potential clients. Those clients never materialized. He'd override my decisions on contracts, going with cheaper suppliers who delivered inferior products. When customers complained, he'd blame the warehouse staff. I'd see him in the parking lot, driving his Porsche bought with his very generous salary while talking on his phone, laughing, clearly not doing any actual work. Eleanor and I had arguments about it. She wanted to confront him directly. I kept saying, "He's young, he's learning, give him time." Looking back, I was making excuses because I didn't want to admit my own son was a lazy, entitled disappointment. That's harsh, but it's the truth. By year 3 of Marcus working with us, he'd burned through 2 assistants, alienated our best clients in the Northeast region, and was somehow spending more money than he was generating in revenue. Then he got married. Jessica. A real piece of work, that one. She came from money, old Connecticut money, and she made damn sure everyone knew it. The first time we met her at dinner, she actually looked around our home, a beautiful 6-bedroom colonial that Eleanor had decorated with love and care, and said, "It's quaint. Very suburban." Eleanor's grip on her wine glass went white-knuckled, but she smiled and said nothing. That's my wife, class and restraint, even when someone deserves a verbal slap.
Jessica changed everything. Before her, Marcus was lazy and entitled but still somewhat connected to us emotionally. After the wedding, it was like we became obstacles to him. She wanted the company. Not to run it, God forbid she'd ever do actual work, she wanted to own it. To liquidate it, sell it off, cash out, and live like Manhattan socialites. I overheard her once, at Marcus's birthday party, telling her friends that the geriatric duo, that's what she called us, were squatting on a gold mine they're too senile to properly monetize. I told Arthur what I heard. He didn't believe me at first. Eleanor, she's young, she's just talking big to impress her friends. But I knew better. I've always been able to read people, especially women like Jessica. She saw us as obstacles, inconveniences, outdated relics standing between her and a lifestyle she believed she deserved. And she was poisoning our son against us, drop by drop.
The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I'll never forget it. Marcus walked into my office without knocking, already a sign of disrespect, and threw a folder on my desk. Inside were documents from 3 different consulting firms, all saying basically the same thing. Thompson Distribution Systems was underperforming its market potential and needed aggressive modernization and new leadership. "Dad," he said, and I noticed he didn't even sit down. "I've been patient. You and Mom are 71 years old. You're out of touch with modern business practices. The company is stagnating under your leadership. It's time to step aside and let someone with fresh ideas take over." Someone with fresh ideas. He meant himself. A man who'd never successfully closed a major deal, who'd driven away more clients than he'd brought in, who showed up to work maybe 3 days a week. I looked at him standing there in his expensive suit that I'd paid for, with money from a company I'd built, and I felt something I'd never felt toward my own child before. Contempt. Pure, undiluted contempt. "You want me to step aside," I said slowly. "You want me to hand over a company worth $30 million to someone who can't even manage a single region profitably?" His face went red, but I wasn't done. "Get out of my office, Marcus. And the next time you want to have a conversation about leadership, Maybe show up for work on time for once in your life.
When Arthur came home that night, he looked like he'd aged 10 years in one afternoon. We sat in our living room, the room where we'd celebrated Marcus's first steps, his graduation, his wedding, and Arthur cried. I'd seen my husband cry maybe 3 times in 43 years of marriage. At his mother's funeral. When I had my cancer scare in 2003. And now, because of our son. We failed him, Eleanor, he said. We gave him too much, protected him from struggle, and created a monster. I held his hand and told him what I truly believed: we didn't fail him, Arthur. We loved him. We gave him every advantage. What he chose to do with those advantages, that's on him, not us. But even as I said it, I wondered if we could have done something different, raised him differently, taught him the value of what we'd built instead of just giving him the fruits of our labor.
For 3 months after that confrontation, Marcus barely spoke to us. He'd come to the office, do the bare minimum, and leave. Eleanor and I discussed retirement seriously for the first time. Maybe he was right, not about being incompetent, but about it being time to step back. We were in our 70s. We'd built something incredible. Maybe it was time to enjoy the rewards and let the next generation take over. That's when Jessica made her move. She called Eleanor one Wednesday morning and suggested lunch. I think we should clear the air, she said, all sweetness and light. Eleanor agreed, hoping maybe there was a chance to build a bridge between our family. They met at some trendy restaurant downtown, and Jessica ordered the most expensive wine on the menu on Eleanor's card, naturally, and then proceeded to lay out her vision for our future. Marcus and I have been talking with lawyers, Jessica said, sipping her $60 glass of Chardonnay. We think it's time for you and Arthur to fully retire. We've found a lovely retirement community in Florida. It has golf, beach access, very upscale. We'd be willing to provide a generous monthly stipend and cover all your living expenses there. Eleanor asked what would happen to the company. Jessica smiled that shark smile of hers and said, Marcus would assume full ownership and control. It's the natural progression, really. You and Arthur can finally relax and enjoy your golden years.
The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. This woman, who'd never worked a real day in her life, who'd married our son barely 4 years ago, was sitting across from me explaining how she and Marcus had decided our future. Not asking, telling. And if we say no? I asked calmly. Jessica's smile got wider. Well, Eleanor, let's be honest. You and Arthur are getting up there in age. Memory issues, decision-making capacity, these are real concerns. Marcus has already spoken with some medical professionals about having you both evaluated for competency. It wouldn't be pleasant, but if you force our hand. She was threatening us. Threatening to have us declared mentally incompetent so they could seize control of the company. I sat down my fork very carefully, looked Jessica straight in her cold, calculating eyes, and said, "Thank you for lunch. And thank you for showing me exactly who you are." Then I walked out, leaving her with the check. Okay.
When Eleanor told me what Jessica had said, I saw red. Not just anger, fury. The kind of rage that makes your hands shake and your vision narrow. My own son was conspiring with his wife to have us declared mentally incompetent. To steal everything we'd built. To throw us away like garbage once they'd gotten what they wanted. I wanted to drive to their house right then and confront Marcus, but Eleanor stopped me. Arthur, listen to me, she said, gripping my arms. If we react emotionally, we lose. They're expecting us to blow up, to make a scene, maybe even to have a health incident that would support their competency claims. We need to be smarter than them. We need to think like we did in 1982, when we had nothing and built everything. She was right. She was always right. My brilliant wife could see 3 moves ahead while I was still processing the current attack. That night, we sat down with legal pads and started planning. First, we needed to know exactly what Marcus and Jessica were plotting. Second, we needed to protect our assets and the company. Third, and this was the hard part, we needed to be willing to lose our son to save everything we built. That last one nearly broke me. But Eleanor squeezed my hand and reminded me. The boy we raised is already gone, Arthur. Marcus made his choice. Now we make ours.
The next morning, I called my old friend Catherine, who'd retired from the law firm where I used to work but still had connections everywhere. I explained the situation carefully, and she gave me 3 names: a family lawyer, a corporate attorney, and a private investigator. Eleanor, she said, if they're planning what you think they're planning, you need documentation. Hard evidence. Protect yourself first, grieve later. We hired all 3. The private investigator, a retired detective named Frank Morrison, started following Marcus and Jessica. Within 2 weeks, he had a file 6 inches thick. Marcus was barely going to the office, maybe 8 hours a week of actual work. The rest of the time? Golf, expensive lunches, meetings with business brokers. Jessica was shopping the company. She'd already gotten preliminary valuations from 3 different firms and was taking meetings with potential buyers. They weren't planning to run Thompson Distribution. They were planning to sell it the moment they got control, cash out for roughly $30 million, and live off the proceeds. Our employees, people who dedicated their careers to us, would be sold off like furniture. Jorge, Martha, David, Susan, all of them would be restructured away the moment new ownership took over. Everything we'd built, every relationship we'd fostered, every value we'd instilled, gone. Liquidated for Marcus's Porsche payments and Jessica's shopping addiction.
The corporate attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, reviewed our company structure and found something interesting. When we'd incorporated Thompson Distribution back in 1985, we'd set it up with specific protective clauses. Neither Eleanor nor I could be removed from the board without unanimous shareholder approval, and we held 65% of shares. Marcus owned 15%, given to him gradually as bonuses for his work. The remaining 20% was distributed among key employees as part of our profit-sharing program. They can't force you out legally, Patricia explained, but they can make your lives miserable. The competency play is their best shot. If they can get a judge to declare you unfit, they could petition for guardianship and control of your assets, including your shares. She slid another document across her desk. However, I'd recommend we get ahead of this. Independent medical evaluations from top neurologists, cognitive function tests, the works. Build a paper trail proving you're both sharp as tacks. We spent the next month doing exactly that. Memory tests, cognitive assessments, physical examinations. Every doctor said the same thing. We were healthier and sharper than most people 20 years younger. Patricia compiled everything into a legal file she called our nuclear option. If Marcus tried to have us declared incompetent, we'd bury him with evidence to the contrary. But Eleanor wanted more than just defense. She wanted justice.
I've always believed that the best way to deal with a snake is to let it think it's winning, right up until the moment you cut off its head. Harsh? Maybe. But Marcus and Jessica had declared war on us, and I wasn't going to let them destroy everything Arthur and I had sacrificed for. So I did something I'm not particularly proud of, but I don't regret. I played the doddering old lady. At the office, I started making small, deliberate mistakes. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to make Marcus think his claims had merit. I'd forget the name of a client during a meeting, then apologize and laugh it off. I'd ask the same question twice in an hour. I started using a cane I didn't actually need. Arthur hated watching me do it, but he understood the strategy. We needed Marcus to feel confident, to overplay his hand, to make a mistake we could exploit. Meanwhile, Frank the investigator kept digging. And what he found was beautiful. Marcus wasn't just lazy and incompetent, he was also skimming. Not a lot, just enough that he thought we wouldn't notice. 50,000 here, 30,000 there, all disguised as business expenses or consulting fees. Over 3 years, he'd stolen nearly $400,000 from the company. His own family's company. That's when I knew we had him.
You know what's funny? Marcus actually thought he was clever. He'd set up a consulting LLC in his wife's name, then hire that LLC to do market analysis for Thompson Distribution. The LLC would bill us ridiculous amounts, $15,000 for a 5-page PowerPoint, that kind of thing, and Marcus would approve the payments. The money would go to Jessica's company, which would then transfer it to their personal accounts. It was textbook embezzlement, just dressed up in barely legal paperwork. Patricia Chen reviewed everything and actually smiled. "This is criminal fraud," she said. "With this evidence, you could have him arrested. At minimum, you can use it as leverage." But Eleanor and I didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. We wanted our company protected and our employees secure. So we developed a different plan. A better plan. We give Marcus exactly what he'd been asking for. We give him control. Sort of. We called a family meeting in early December. Marcus and Jessica showed up at our house, looking like cats who'd caught a canary. They thought we were finally going to cave, finally going to hand over the company and retire to that Florida facility they'd picked out. Jessica was practically glowing with anticipated victory. Marcus had a folder with him, probably the paperwork they wanted us to sign.
We sat in the living room, Arthur and I on one couch, Marcus and Jessica on the other. The same room where we'd opened Christmas presents, celebrated birthdays, had Sunday dinners. Now it felt like a battlefield. "Mom, Dad," Marcus started, using that patronizing tone he'd developed. "Jessica and I have been talking, and we really think it's time," Arthur cut him off. "You're right," Arthur said. "It is time. Time for some changes at Thompson Distribution." I watched Marcus's eyes light up. He actually thought he'd won. "Starting January 1st, Eleanor and I are stepping back from day-to-day operations. You'll be promoted to president and COO." Jessica grabbed Marcus's hand, squeezing it excitedly. But Arthur wasn't finished. "However, Eleanor and I will retain our positions as chairman and vice chair of the board. We'll also be restructuring the company's financial oversight." I took over from there. "Marcus, we've noticed some irregularities in expense reports over the past 3 years. As part of the new structure, all expenses over $1,000 will require board approval. We're also implementing a forensic accounting review, which will begin in January. Just standard procedure for a company our size." I watched the color drain from Marcus's face. He knew. In that instant, he knew we'd found his theft.
The room went silent. Jessica looked confused. She hadn't been fully briefed on Marcus's embezzlement scheme. But Marcus understood perfectly. His jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. "You can't do that," he said, voice tight with barely controlled panic. "As president, I should have full financial authority. And you will," Eleanor said sweetly, "for legitimate business expenses. But given some concerns raised by our accounting team, the board feels additional oversight is prudent. I'm sure you understand it's just good corporate governance." She was magnificent, my wife, delivering the death blow with a smile and perfect politeness. Jessica finally caught on. "What concerns?" she demanded. "What are you accusing him of?" Arthur pulled out a thin folder, just a teaser, not the full 6 inches of evidence we had, and slid it across the coffee table. "We're not accusing anyone of anything, Jessica. We're simply noting that Marcus's consulting company, the one registered in your name, has received over $400,000 from Thompson Distribution for work that seems questionable at best." I watched Marcus's face cycle through emotions: shock, fear, anger, and finally desperate calculation. He was trying to figure out how much we knew, what we could prove, whether he could talk his way out of it. He couldn't. We had bank statements, fake invoices, email trails, everything. Patricia Chen had built a case that could send him to prison for 3 to 5 years.
"Mom, Dad, I can explain," Marcus started, but I held up my hand. "No explanations necessary, honey. We've already made our decision. You have 2 options." I laid them out clearly. Option 1, you accept the promotion with the new oversight structure. You work honestly, rebuild trust, and maybe someday we can move past this. The board won't pursue the embezzlement investigation as long as you comply with all new policies. Option 2, Arthur continued, his voice like iron, we turn over all evidence to the district attorney and sue you for every penny you stole, plus damages. You'll lose your shares in the company, face criminal charges, and likely serve prison time. Oh, And we'll make sure every business publication in the region knows exactly why Thompson Distribution's heir apparent is going to jail for defrauding his own parents. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica looked at Marcus with horror. I don't think she'd realized how serious the theft was, or how much evidence we had. Marcus looked at us with something I'd never seen in his eyes before, genuine fear. Not of consequences for himself, but fear that he'd finally, truly burned the bridge to his parents.
Marcus chose option 1. What else could he do? But the relationship was dead. We all knew it. He showed up to work after New Year's, kept his head down, stopped stealing, and basically became a model employee out of sheer terror. The irony was that with proper oversight and actual accountability, he wasn't even that bad at the job. When he couldn't coast on nepotism and had to actually work, he was adequate. Not great, not the visionary leader he'd imagined himself to be, but adequate. Jessica filed for divorce 6 months later. Turns out she'd married Marcus for his inheritance, not for love. When it became clear that inheritance was going to take a lot longer to materialize and come with far more strings attached, she bailed. Took half his assets in the settlement, including most of his company's shares. Those shares reverted to Eleanor and me per the original incorporation agreement. Marcus didn't even fight it. I think part of him was relieved to be rid of her. For 2 years, things were functional. Not good, not warm, but functional. Marcus did his job, Eleanor and I maintained control, and the company actually grew under the new structure. We promoted 3 of our longtime employees to executive positions, implemented better systems, and proved that the doddering old couple still knew how to run a damn business.
But here's the thing about betrayal, it changes you. Arthur and I were never the same after Marcus's attempted coup. We didn't trust as easily. We didn't assume the best of people anymore. And every time we looked at our son, we saw not the baby we'd held, not the boy we'd raised, but the man who'd tried to steal from us and throw us away. That knowledge sat between us at every holiday dinner, every board meeting, every forced family interaction. Marcus knew it too. I could see it in his eyes: shame, resentment, and something that might have been regret. But he never apologized. Not really. He'd say things like, I made some mistakes or things got out of hand, but he never looked us in the eye and said, I'm sorry I tried to steal your company and have you declared incompetent. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe admitting it fully would break something in him. Okay.
In 2019, Eleanor and I finally did what we'd been planning for years. We started succession planning, but on our terms. We brought in an executive search firm to find a qualified CEO from outside the family. Marcus would remain as COO, but the top position would go to someone with actual credentials and proven leadership ability. When we announced it at a board meeting, Marcus just nodded. He'd learned his lesson about fighting us. The new CEO, a woman named Rebecca Torres with 20 years of logistics experience, was exactly what Thompson Distribution needed. She modernized our systems without destroying our culture, expanded into new markets, and actually mentored Marcus instead of just giving him authority he hadn't earned. Under Rebecca's leadership and our board oversight, the company's value increased to $42 million. We'd not only protected what we'd built, we'd grown it. But the real change came in how we structured our legacy. Eleanor and I created an employee profit-sharing trust that would ensure our workers, the people who'd actually built this company alongside us, would benefit from its success long after we were gone. 30% of the company would eventually transfer to that trust. Another 30% would go to charity. Marcus would inherit his existing shares, roughly 15%, but he'd never have controlling interest. He'd be comfortable, even wealthy, but he'd never be able to sell the company out from under the people who made it work.
When we told Marcus about the trust structure, I watched his face carefully. Part of me hoped to see relief, understanding, maybe even pride that his parents were taking care of the people who'd been loyal to us. Instead, I saw calculation. He was doing the math, figuring out what his 15% would be worth, whether he could live with not having absolute control. It's fair, Marcus, I said quietly. More than fair, considering everything. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for just a moment I saw my little boy again. The one who'd cried when we couldn't afford Christmas presents. The one who'd hugged us so tight at his Princeton graduation. That boy was still in there somewhere, buried under layers of entitlement and disappointment and shame. "I know, Mom," he said. And I think he actually did know. But knowing something is fair and accepting it gracefully are two very different things. Marcus signed the papers, acknowledged the trust structure, and continued working at the company. But the warmth, the possibility of real reconciliation that never came back. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt.
People ask us sometimes, friends, other business owners, even reporters who've written about Thompson Distribution's success, they ask if we regret how things turned out with Marcus. If we wish we'd handled it differently, been more forgiving, found a way to restore the family relationship. And the truth is complicated. Do I wish my son hadn't tried to steal from us? Obviously. Do I wish I had a relationship with him like I imagined when he was born? Sunday dinners, grandkids visiting, a real family legacy? Every single day. But do I regret protecting what Eleanor and I built, protecting our employees, and refusing to reward betrayal? Not for 1 second. Eleanor and I made a choice when Marcus and Jessica came for us. We could have been victims, handed over the company to keep the peace, maybe preserve some hollow version of a family relationship. Or we could have fought back, protected our life's work, and accepted that our son made his own choices. We chose the latter, and I sleep just fine at night knowing we did.
Arthur's right, but I'll add this: we didn't destroy Marcus. He's still wealthy, still has a good job, still has opportunities most people never get. What we destroyed was his fantasy that he could betray us without consequences. That he could steal, lie, and plot against his own parents and still inherit everything like some kind of prince. We taught him the hardest lesson a parent can teach: actions have consequences. Even when you're family. Maybe especially when you're family, because family should mean something more than just genetics and shared history. It should mean loyalty, respect, and love. Marcus chose to throw those things away. We simply chose not to reward him for it. The sad part is, if he'd been honest with us from the beginning, if he'd said, "Dad, Mom, I want to lead the company, but I need help learning how," we would have moved heaven and earth to train him. If he'd said, "I'm struggling, I made some mistakes with money," we would have helped him. But he chose deception and betrayal instead. And you can't build anything lasting on that foundation.
Now, I need to tell you about the last real conversation Marcus and I had. It was about 6 months ago, in the spring of 2024. We were both at the office late, unusual for him, normal for me. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office when he knocked on the door. Actually knocked. That hadn't happened in years. "Dad, can we talk?" he asked. He looks tired. Not physically tired, but soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying shame and regret for too long. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same chair where we'd had that explosive confrontation about him wanting to push us out. "What's on your mind, son?" He was quiet for a long moment, just looking at his hands. Finally, he said, "I've been thinking about what you and Mom did, building this company from nothing. And I've been thinking about what I did, what I tried to do." He looked up at me then, and his eyes were red. "I was angry at you for so long. Angry that you wouldn't just hand everything over, that you wouldn't trust me, that you made me work under supervision like a child. But you were right. I didn't deserve trust. I hadn't earned it."
Arthur came home that night and told me about the conversation. He was shaking not from anger, but from emotion. Our son had finally, after all these years, admitted what he'd done. Taken responsibility. It wasn't a full apology, not really, but it was acknowledgement. And after so much time, that acknowledgement meant something. "What did you tell him?" I asked Arthur. He sat down heavily in his favorite chair and rubbed his face. "I told him the truth. That I loved him. That I'd always love him. But that love doesn't mean giving someone control over your life's work when they've proven they'll destroy it. I told him that maybe someday we could rebuild some kind of relationship, but it would have to be based on honesty and mutual respect, not on him waiting for us to die so he could cash out. It wasn't a happy ending, not the kind you see in movies where everyone hugs and cries and the music swells. But it was real. It was honest. And honestly, that's more valuable than a fake reconciliation built on pretending the past didn't happen.
The thing about being 73 years old is that you stop caring so much about what could have been and start appreciating what actually is. Eleanor and I built something remarkable. Not just a successful company, but a legacy that will take care of people long after we're gone. Our employees have profit sharing, retirement security, and real ownership in what they've helped create. That matters more to us than whether our son sends us birthday cards. And here's what Marcus will never understand. We didn't win because we were ruthless or cruel. We won because we understood something fundamental about business and about life. You can't build anything lasting on betrayal and shortcuts. Real, meaningful success comes from hard work, integrity, and treating people with respect. We built Thompson Distribution on those principles in 1982, and we protected those principles in 2018 when Marcus tried to tear them down. Rebecca Torres, our CEO, came to us last month with news that a major national retailer wants to acquire Thompson Distribution for $65 million. A damn good offer. But the acquisition agreement requires maintaining our employee profit-sharing trust for at least 10 years and keeping our headquarters local. They want our company because of how we run it, not despite it. That's legacy.
Arthur and I are considering the offer. Not because we need the money, we're comfortable, and we've set aside plenty for our retirement. But because maybe it's time to let someone else carry the torch. We've been fighting for 42 years. Building, protecting, maintaining. We're tired. The good kind of tired that comes from a life well lived, but tired nonetheless. Marcus will still get his share from the sale, about $10 million after taxes and trust allocations. He'll be financially set for life. More than that, he'll have the satisfaction of knowing his parents built something valuable enough that a Fortune 500 company wanted to buy it. Whether he appreciates that or just sees dollar signs, well, that's up to him. What matters to me is that Arthur and I did it together. Every decision, every fight, every victory, we were a team. When Marcus and Jessica came for us, we didn't fracture or turn on each other. We stood together, planned together, and won together. That's what a real partnership looks like. That's what 51 years of marriage looks like. Not perfect, not always easy, but unbreakable when it matters most.
You know what's funny? People hear our story, and they focus on the betrayal, the drama, the corporate intrigue. But that's not what this story is really about. It's about the fact that Eleanor and I built something from nothing, and when someone tried to take it away, even our own son, we had the strength and the smarts to protect it. Not for ourselves, really. For the idea that hard work matters. That integrity matters. That you don't just get to inherit success. You have to earn it. I think about those early days sometimes. Living above that laundromat, eating ramen noodles for dinner, Eleanor and I staying up late making business plans on our kitchen table. We had nothing but each other and a dream. Now we have everything we ever wanted except for one thing, a relationship with our son. And I've made peace with that trade-off because we didn't make that choice. Marcus did. If there's one thing I'd want young people to understand, it's this. The choices you make in your 20s and 30s will define your life in your 60s and 70s. Marcus chose shortcuts and entitlement. Eleanor and I chose hard work and integrity. Now we're in our 70s, and we sleep well at night. Marcus is in his 40s, and I suspect he doesn't. That's not my burden to carry anymore.
I used to pray that Marcus would have children someday. I wanted to be a grandmother so badly. But after everything that happened, I'm almost grateful he doesn't. Because I don't think he learned the lessons he needed to learn to be a good parent. And maybe that's harsh, but it's true. Being a parent isn't just about providing material things. It's about teaching values, demonstrating integrity, showing your children how to be decent human beings. We tried to teach Marcus those things. Somewhere along the way, those lessons didn't stick. But we did raise him. We loved him. We gave him every advantage we could. At some point, every parent has to accept that their children are autonomous adults who make their own choices. We can't control those choices, and we can't sacrifice everything we built to cushion the consequences of bad choices. That's not love. That's enabling.
Let me tell you about one more thing, and then we'll wrap up this story. Last week, Eleanor and I visited the Thompson distribution warehouse. Not as executives doing an inspection, but just as the two people who started this whole thing 42 years ago. We walked through the facility, talked to workers, watched the operation hum along like a well-oiled machine. Jorge, our warehouse manager who Marcus once called inefficient, came up to us. He's 62 now, planning to retire next year. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," he said, "I just want you to know that I bought my house because of this company. I sent 3 kids to college because of this company. My wife and I have a retirement fund that will actually let us retire with dignity because of this company. Thank you." He had tears in his eyes when he said it. That right there, that's why we fought so hard. Not for money or pride or revenge, but because Thompson Distribution represents real lives, real families, real dignity. Jorge deserves his retirement. Martha in accounting deserves her security. All of them deserve to work for a company that values them, not one that sees them as disposable assets on a spreadsheet. That's what Marcus and Jessica wanted to destroy, and that's what we refused to let die.
As we were leaving the warehouse, Arthur took my hand, something he's done a million times over 51 years of marriage, and said, "We did good, Eleanor. Whatever happens with Marcus, whatever regrets we might have, we did good here." And he was right. We did do good. Our legacy isn't just Thompson Distribution Systems. It's Jorge's house. It's Martha's retirement. It's the college educations and the dignified retirements and the family security we made possible for dozens of people. We took $15,000 in a dream and we turned it into generational stability for families beyond just our own. Marcus may never understand that, and that's his loss. I look at Arthur now, he's got more gray hair, more wrinkles, moves a little slower than he used to. But his eyes still have that same sharp intelligence they had when we were 32 and planning our future in a cramped apartment. We've been through bankruptcy threats, cancer scares, business downturns, and family betrayal. And we're still here. Still together. Still strong.
Here's what I've learned after 7 decades on this planet. Life isn't fair, but it is just. Marcus thought he deserved success because he was born into it. He thought the family business was his birthright, something that should be handed over regardless of his character or competence. But the universe doesn't work that way. You get what you earn, not what you expect. Eleanor and I earned everything we have. We earned it through sacrifice and long hours and smart decisions and yes, a little bit of luck. But mostly through refusing to quit when things got hard. When Marcus tried to take that away, we fought back not because we were greedy or vindictive, but because we understood something he never did. Success that you don't earn, you can't keep. Even if we'd handed him the company, he would have run it into the ground within 5 years. We didn't save the company from Marcus. We saved Marcus from himself. Now, in what I assume are the final chapters of my life, I have no regrets. I love my wife fiercely. I built something meaningful. I protected the people who depended on me. And I refused to enable betrayal just because it wore a familiar face. If that makes me a hard man, so be it. I'd rather be hard and right than soft and wrong.
People talk about family like it's this sacred thing that you have to preserve at all costs. But I disagree. Family is sacred when it's built on love, respect, and mutual support. When it's built on exploitation and entitlement, it's just people who happen to share DNA. Marcus is my son, and I will always love the boy he was. But I don't have to accept the man he became. The hardest thing I've ever done wasn't building a company or fighting cancer or dealing with business downturns. The hardest thing was accepting that my son chose a path that led away from us. That he valued money and status more than he valued integrity and family bonds. That was his choice, not ours. We simply chose not to reward it. And you know what? I sleep better now than I did when we were constantly trying to manage Marcus's behavior, cover for his mistakes, and pretend everything was fine. There's a peace that comes from living authentically, from being honest about painful truths, from protecting what matters even when it costs you something precious. Arthur and I have that peace now.
So here we are, in December 2024. Thompson Distribution is thriving under Rebecca's leadership. The acquisition offer is on the table. Eleanor and I are considering whether to sell and finally, truly retire. Marcus is. Marcus. Still working at the company. Still keeping his distance. Still carrying whatever burden of shame and resentment he's chosen to carry. And Eleanor and I? We're planning a trip to Italy next spring. Something we always talked about doing but never made time for. We're going to rent a villa in Tuscany for a month, drink wine, eat pasta, and not think about business or betrayal or family drama. We're going to be Arthur and Eleanor again, just two people who fell in love 51 years ago and built a life together. That's the real story, if you want to know. Not the corporate intrigue or the family betrayal. The real story is that love real, committed, partnership love can survive anything. Business struggles, cancer, betrayal by your own child, everything. Eleanor and I survived it all because we made a decision 42 years ago that we were in this together, no matter what. That decision saved us, saved the company, and created a legacy worth having.
I look at young couples sometimes in restaurants, at the park, shopping at the grocery store, and I want to tell them something. I want to say, the person you're with right now, they can be your greatest asset or your biggest mistake. Choose someone who will stand with you when things get hard. Choose someone who values integrity over comfort. Choose someone who will fight for what you build together. Arthur is that person for me. After everything we've been through, I'd choose him again in a heartbeat. Marcus never found that. Jessica left him the moment things got difficult. And now he's alone, wealthy but alone, and I think that's the saddest part of this whole story. Not that he lost the company, but that he never learned what really matters. Partnership. Loyalty. Building something meaningful. Those are the things that sustain you when you're 73 and looking back on your life.
I want to be clear about something. I'm not the hero of this story. I made mistakes. I was too lenient with Marcus when he was young, too willing to excuse his laziness because I wanted to believe in him. I gave him opportunities he hadn't earned, protected him from consequences he needed to face. If I could do it over, I'd be tougher earlier. Maybe that would have made a difference. Maybe not. You can't ever really know. But what I didn't do was abandon my principles when it mattered most. When Marcus and Jessica came for us, I didn't fold. I didn't sacrifice everything Eleanor and I built just to preserve a relationship that had already been poisoned by betrayal. Some people might call that cold. I call it self-respect. I call it honoring the commitment I made to my wife and to the people who depended on us. The business world is full of stories like ours, I think. Founders who built something from nothing, only to have the next generation try to tear it down for quick profit. The difference is that Eleanor and I saw it coming and had the courage to fight back. That's not heroism. That's just refusing to be a victim.
You know what I think about sometimes? I think about parallel universes, alternate timelines where we made different choices. What if we'd given Marcus the company when he first asked? He'd have sold it within 2 years, fired everyone, and burned through the money on a lifestyle he couldn't sustain. By the time he was 50, he'd be broke and bitter, blaming us for not teaching him better. What if we'd been harsher earlier, cut him off completely after the embezzlement? He might have hit rock bottom, but he also might have learned humility and rebuilt himself into someone better. We'll never know. The choice we actually made, holding him accountable while keeping a door open for redemption, that was the middle path. Maybe it was the right choice. Maybe there was no right choice. All I know for certain is that Arthur and I made our decisions together, with clear eyes and full hearts, trying to balance love with wisdom. We weren't perfect. We were human. But we tried to do right by everyone involved: our son, our employees, ourselves, and the legacy we wanted to leave. That's all anyone can do.
Someone asked me recently, At a retirement party for one of our longtime employees, whether I'd forgive Marcus if he ever truly apologized. The question caught me off guard. I thought about it for a long moment, and then I said, I've already forgiven him. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means I'm not carrying anger anymore. I've let that go. But I'm also not pretending we can go back to what we were. Some things, once broken, stay broken. The person who asked younger guy, probably in his 30s, looked confused. I think he expected me to say either, I'll never forgive him, or I'd welcome him back with open arms. The truth is messier than that. I can forgive Marcus for his betrayal, while also acknowledging that our relationship is permanently changed. I can hope he finds peace while also maintaining boundaries. Both things can be true at the same time. That's what getting older teaches you, I guess. That life isn't binary. That you can love someone and still not trust them. That you can grieve what was lost while being grateful for what you have. Marcus and I will never have the relationship I dreamed of when he was born. But I have Eleanor, I have the legacy we built, and I have the satisfaction of knowing we stood up for what was right. That's enough.
I pray for Marcus sometimes. Not in a religious way necessarily, though I was raised Catholic and some of that stuck with me. But I hope for him. I hope he finds happiness. I hope he learns from his mistakes. I hope that someday, maybe when Arthur and I are gone, he'll look back and understand what we were trying to teach him. Not about business or money, but about character and integrity and what really matters in life. But whether he learns those lessons or not, Arthur and I are okay. We have each other. We have our health. We have the satisfaction of a life well lived and a battle well fought. We have employees who respect us and a company that will continue doing good work long after we're gone. We have a marriage that survived everything life could throw at it. That's not nothing. That's everything. Okay.
You want to know the moment I knew Eleanor was the one? It wasn't our wedding day or some grand romantic gesture. It was a Tuesday afternoon in 1983, about 6 months after we'd started the company. We just lost our biggest client. They went with a competitor who undercut our prices by 20%. I came home devastated, ready to give up, thinking maybe everyone was right and we were crazy for trying this. Eleanor was at that kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg we couldn't afford to replace. She had papers spread everywhere, doing calculations by hand because we couldn't even afford a decent calculator yet. I told her we'd lost the account. She looked up at me, and without missing a beat, she said, "Good. They were always going to be high maintenance. Now we have time to pursue the Mitchell account, which is worth 3 times as much." She'd already moved on, already had a plan, already believed in us when I'd stopped believing in myself. That's who Eleanor is. The person who sees possibility when I see obstacles. The person who plans the next move while I'm still processing the last loss. For 42 years, she's been my partner in every sense of the word. Equal contributor, equal decision maker, equal owner of everything we built. Marcus never understood that. He saw his mother as the soft one, the one he could manipulate with tears and guilt. He couldn't have been more wrong.
Arthur tells that story like he was the only one who wanted to quit. The truth is, we both wanted to quit about 100 times in those first 5 years. But we had a rule: we could never both be discouraged on the same day. If he was down, I had to be up. If I was falling apart, he had to be strong. We took turns carrying each other through the hard times. That's what partnership really means. I remember one night in 1987, we just made our first $1 million in annual revenue. We were sitting in our new house, our first real house, not an apartment, and Arthur opened a bottle of cheap champagne. We toasted to success, and then I started crying. Not happy tears, sad tears. Arthur was confused. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" "We made it. We actually made it." And I said, "I'm scared we're going to lose it. I'm scared we're going to mess this up." He held me and said something I've never forgotten: "If we lose it all tomorrow, we'll still have each other. And if we have each other, we can build it all again." Money comes and goes, Eleanor. But us? We're forever. That's when I knew, absolutely knew, that I'd married the right man. Not because he was smooth or romantic, but because he understood what actually mattered. 23 years later, when Marcus tried to take everything from us, those words came back to me. We still had each other. That meant we could survive anything.
The corporate world loves to talk about legacy planning and succession strategies like it's all spreadsheets and org charts. But the real question of legacy isn't who takes over your company. It's what values persist after you're gone. What principles survive? What impact continues? Thompson Distribution will probably be sold within the next year. The Thompson name might even disappear eventually. That's how acquisitions work. But the employee profit-sharing trust will continue. The culture of treating workers with dignity will continue, at least for a while, because it's written into the acquisition agreement. The hundreds of families we help build financial security, that impact is permanent. That's legacy. Marcus will inherit money. A lot of money. But he won't inherit the thing that actually matters. The knowledge that he built something meaningful. That he earned respect through integrity. That he treated people right and did good work. You can't inherit those things. You can only earn them. And he chose not to do the work required.
I've been thinking a lot about mothers and sons lately. About how we shape our children and how they shape themselves despite us. I gave Marcus everything I had as a mother. Love, attention, education, opportunities. I taught him right from wrong, read him books, took him to church, showed him how to treat people with kindness. And somehow, somewhere, those lessons got lost or rejected or buried under other influences. Part of me will always wonder, what did I do wrong? Where did I fail him? But Arthur helped me understand that this kind of thinking is a trap. Marcus had agency. He made choices. Yes, we shaped him, but he shaped himself too. At some point, a child becomes an adult and you have to let go of the guilt of their failures. Otherwise, you take away their autonomy, their responsibility for their own life. I'm his mother. I'll always be his mother. But I'm also Eleanor Thompson, co-founder of a company that employs 63 people and has created real value in the world. I'm Arthur's wife and partner. I'm a business leader who fought off a hostile takeover attempt. I'm all of these things, not just Marcus's mother. And I had to choose which identity to prioritize when he forced the issue. I chose the one built on integrity instead of the one built on biology.
Let me tell you what I want people to take away from our story. It's not, don't trust your family, or business is more important than relationships. Those are the wrong lessons. The real lesson is this: establish boundaries and defend them, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. We didn't destroy our relationship with Marcus because we were greedy or vindictive. We destroyed it because he crossed boundaries that should be sacred. He stole from us. He lied to us. He conspired to have us declared incompetent so he could steal more. Those aren't minor infractions or youthful mistakes. Those are fundamental betrayals of trust. And if we'd accepted them, if we'd rewarded them by handing over the company anyway, we wouldn't have been loving parents. We'd have been enablers. The hardest part of being a parent isn't loving your child. That's easy, instinctive. The hardest part is loving them enough to let them face consequences. To let them fail. To refuse to rescue them from the results of their own choices. Every instinct screams at you to protect them, to cushion the blow, to make it all okay. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let reality teach them lessons you couldn't.
I've had people, friends, family members, even strangers who've heard our story tell me I'm too harsh. That Marcus is my son and I should forgive and forget. That family is more important than money. And I always say the same thing: this was never about money. It was about respect, integrity, and boundaries. If Marcus had come to us honestly, admitted he was struggling, asked for help, we would have moved heaven and earth to support him. But he didn't do that. He schemed. He stole. He plotted with his wife to have us declared mentally incompetent. Those aren't the actions of someone who made a mistake. Those are the actions of someone who viewed his parents as obstacles to be eliminated. And I'm supposed to just accept that because we share DNA? I'm supposed to hand over everything we built to someone who already proved he'd destroy it? No. Absolutely not. Love doesn't mean being a doormat. Love doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity and your life's work to avoid conflict. Real love sometimes means saying, I love you, but I won't enable your worst impulses. I love you, but I won't reward betrayal. I love you, but I also love myself and the people who depend on me. That's what we did. And I'd do it again.
Rebecca Torres asked me last month why we're considering selling the company now, after fighting so hard to protect it. Good question. The truth is, Eleanor and I are tired. Not defeated, tired we won that battle. But tired of fighting. Tired of having to be vigilant all the time. Tired of the weight of responsibility. For 42 years, every decision we made affected not just us, but dozens of families. That's a heavy burden. A good burden, a meaningful burden, but still a burden. And at 73, I think we've earned the right to set it down. The acquisition offer ensures that our employees will be protected, that the company culture will be maintained, and that Eleanor and I can finally just be Arthur and Eleanor again. Not Chairman Thompson and Vice Chair Thompson. Just us. Marcus will get his share. $10 million, give or take. More money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. Enough to set him up for the rest of his life, if he's smart with it. And if he's not smart with it, that's his problem, not ours. We've given him every advantage, every opportunity, every chance. What he does with this final gift is entirely up to him.
I used to lie awake at night, worrying about Marcus. Worrying about what would happen to him, whether he'd be okay, whether we'd made the right choices. But I don't do that anymore. Not because I stopped caring, but because I accepted something fundamental: I can't live his life for him. I can't make his choices. I can't protect him from himself. All I can do is live my own life with integrity, make my own choices with wisdom, and hope that someday he figures out what really matters. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. Either way, Arthur and I will be okay. We have each other, we have our health, and we have the satisfaction of knowing we built something meaningful and protected it when it mattered most. When I think about my legacy now, I don't think about Marcus. I think about Jorge and his house. I think about Martha and her retirement. I think about the 63 families who have financial security because of choices Arthur and I made. I think about the values we demonstrated: integrity, hard work, treating people with dignity. Those things will outlast all of us. That's what matters.
Someone at the retirement party asked me what advice I'd give to young entrepreneurs. I thought about it for a while, and then I said, marry the right person. Everything else is secondary. People laughed like I was joking. I wasn't joking. The single most important business decision Eleanor and I ever made wasn't about suppliers or contracts or market positioning. It was choosing each other. Every success we had together. Every failure we faced together. Every decision we made together. When Marcus tried to destroy us, we survived because we were united. If Eleanor and I had been at odds, if there had been any cracks in our partnership, Marcus and Jessica would have exploited them. We would have lost everything. But there were no cracks. After 5 decades together, we knew each other's thoughts, trusted each other's judgment, and presented a united front that couldn't be broken. That's what young people need to understand. You're not just choosing a spouse. You're choosing a business partner, a co-parent, a companion through every crisis and triumph life will throw at you. Choose someone who makes you stronger. Choose someone who shares your values. Choose someone you can trust with your life, because in many ways, you will be trusting them with exactly that.
Arthur and I are planning to renew our vows next year for our 52nd anniversary. Not a big ceremony, just us, maybe a few close friends, and a simple ceremony at the church where we got married. We've been through so much together. Built a company. Raised a son. Survived betrayal. Fought cancer. Faced every challenge that life could throw at us. And we're still here. Still together. Still choosing each other every single day. That's the real love story, if you want to know. Not the dramatic beginning or the fairy tale romance. The real story is 52 years of choosing partnership over ego, unity over division, and love over convenience. It's boring in the way that stability is boring. It's not dramatic. But it's real, and it's lasting, and it's the foundation that everything else was built on. Marcus never saw that. He saw his parents as obstacles or resources, not as people who'd built a real partnership. He never understood that his mother wasn't just the soft one who could be manipulated. She was my equal partner, my co-founder, my best friend. An attack on her was an attack on me. An attempt to steal from her was an attempt to steal from me. We are one unit. That unity saved us.
I'm going to say something that might sound harsh, but it's true. I sleep better now than I did when we were still trying to have a relationship with Marcus. The constant disappointment, the walking on eggshells, the hoping he'd change, all of that was exhausting. Now there's clarity. He made his choices. We made ours. There's no ambiguity, no false hope. No pretending everything is fine when it isn't. Clarity, even painful clarity, is better than comfortable delusion. For years, we deluded ourselves that Marcus would mature, that he'd develop a work ethic, that he'd appreciate what we'd built. We made excuses for him. We gave him chance after chance. And all of that accomplished was prolonging the inevitable confrontation. If we'd drawn hard boundaries earlier, maybe things would be different. Or maybe they'd be exactly the same. We'll never know. What I do know is that since we stopped trying to maintain a pretend relationship and accepted the reality of who Marcus is, my blood pressure is lower, I sleep through the night, and I can actually enjoy my life. That's not cold or heartless. That's self-preservation. And at 73 years old, I've earned the right to preserve myself and my wife instead of sacrificing our peace for someone who doesn't value us anyway.
There's a difference between giving up on someone and accepting who they are. We haven't given up on Marcus. We still hope he finds happiness and wisdom. We still love the boy he was and mourn the man he could have been. But we accept the man he actually is, someone who valued money over relationships, shortcuts over integrity, and entitlement over earned respect. That's who he chose to be. And we choose not to enable or reward those values. I think about the grandchildren we'll never have. Marcus and Jessica didn't have kids, and now he's 42 and single. It's unlikely at this point. Part of me grieves that. I would have been a good grandmother. I would have loved those children fiercely. But another part of me wonders if it's for the best. Would Marcus have raised them with the values Arthur and I tried to instill? Or would he have raised them with the same entitlement that poisoned him? I'll never know. And maybe that's okay. What I have instead is a legacy with the employees we've helped, the families we've supported, the values we've demonstrated. Jorge's grandchildren will grow up in a house their grandfather owns because of Thompson Distribution. Martha's grandchildren will see their grandmother retire with dignity. That's a kind of legacy too. Maybe not the one I imagined, but a meaningful one nonetheless.
As I sit here now, looking back on 73 years of life and 42 years of building Thompson Distribution, I realized that success isn't what I thought it would be when I was young. Young Arthur thought success meant money, status, leaving a family dynasty. Old Arthur knows that success means integrity maintained, partnerships honored, and the ability to look at yourself in the mirror without shame. We built a company worth tens of millions of dollars. That's success by conventional measures. But the real success was staying true to our principles when it would have been easier to compromise them. The real success was standing together when forces tried to tear us apart. The real success was protecting the people who depended on us even when it meant losing our son. Those are the victories that matter. If I died tomorrow and at my age, that's not an abstract possibility. I'd die knowing I lived well. I loved deeply. I built meaningfully. I fought necessary battles and won them. I treated people with dignity. I honored my commitments. I was a good husband, even if I wasn't a successful father. And honestly, that's enough. More than enough.
I used to think that getting old would be sad, full of regrets and what ifs. But it's not. At least not for me. Yes, there are things I wish had gone differently. I wish Marcus had been the son we hoped for. I wish we had grandchildren. I wish my knees didn't hurt when it rains. But those wishes are small compared to the gratitude I feel for what I do have. I have a husband who still makes me laugh after 51 years. I have a life well lived and work well done. I have the satisfaction of knowing that when we faced our greatest test, Arthur and I didn't just survive, we prevailed. We protected what mattered. We stayed true to ourselves. We loved each other enough to be a united front against anything and anyone, even our own son. That's not a tragedy. That's a triumph. Maybe not the triumph we envisioned when Marcus was born, but a triumph nonetheless. We won the battles that mattered. We lost the relationship we wanted with our son, but we kept the relationship we had with each other, with our values, and with our own sense of dignity. And in the final accounting, that's what matters most.
So here's what I want you to understand. Life will test you. It will test your values, your relationships, your resolve. Sometimes those tests come from strangers or competitors or bad luck. And sometimes, the hardest tests come from the people you love most. When that happens, and if you live long enough, it probably will you have to make a choice. Compromise who you are to preserve the relationship, or stand firm in your principles and accept the consequences? Eleanor and I chose to stand firm. We chose integrity over comfort, truth over false peace, and self-respect over family harmony. That choice cost us our son. But it saved our marriage, our company, our employees' futures, and our own souls. We can live with that trade-off. More than live with it, we're at peace with it. Thompson Distribution Systems will be sold soon. The Thompson name will fade from the corporate world. But the values we built it on, hard work, integrity, treating people with dignity, those will persist in the lives we touched. That's legacy. Not a name on a building, but principles that continue to influence the world after you're gone.
To anyone listening to our story, whether you're young or old, successful or struggling, here's what I hope you take away. Choose your partner wisely, because they'll determine whether you can weather life's storms. Build something meaningful, because meaning sustains you when money doesn't. Stand up for your principles, even when it costs you something precious. And most importantly, never sacrifice your dignity for someone who doesn't value you, even if that someone is your own child. Arthur and I built a life together. We built a company together. We fought battles together. And we'll finish our lives together, in peace, with no regrets about the choices we made. We loved our son. We tried our best with him. But when he forced us to choose between enabling his betrayal and protecting our life's work, we chose integrity. And we'd make that choice again. That's our story. The story of a power couple who built something from nothing, protected it when it mattered most, and stayed together through everything. We didn't get the fairy tale ending with the happy family reunion. We got something better, the truth, lived with dignity. And that's enough. Take care of your relationships. Build something meaningful. Stand up for what's right. And remember, family is important, but self-respect is essential. Never compromise the latter to preserve the former. That's the lesson Arthur and I learned the hard way. May you learn it more easily.
The world will test you. It will test your marriage, your values, your resolve. When Eleanor and I started with nothing, we only had each other. When we built something valuable, we had each other. And when our own son tried to destroy us, we still had each other. That unity, that unbreakable partnership is what saved us.
To every young couple out there, choose someone who will stand with you when everyone else walks away. Choose someone who values integrity over comfort. Choose someone you can trust with not just your heart, but your life's work. Because someday, you might need to depend on that trust completely.
And to every parent, love your children fiercely, but don't love them blindly. Teach them values. Hold them accountable. And understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them face the consequences of their choices. We love Marcus enough to say no. That's real love.
Take care of your parents, because one day you'll be old too. Respect what they built, honor their sacrifices, and understand that their wisdom came at a price you haven't paid yet. And if you can't do that, at least have the decency not to try to steal from them. The world keeps turning. The moral arc bends toward justice. And love, real, committed, partnership love conquers all. Even betrayal. Even loss. Even heartbreak. As long as you have each other, you can survive anything. Thank you for listening to our story. Subscribe for more true stories. Share if this touched you.